Hello and welcome to my spoiler review of The Batman, where hot damn do we have a lot to discuss, so get comfortable. And in my non-spoiler review, I divided the review into the good and the not as good. But here, I just love this movie so much. I just embrace it, mistakes and all. So I'm just going to talk about it. I've laid out the conversation here, as you can see, in a way that I think unfolds naturally. And we'll just sprinkle in some of the things that I think could have been better. But at the end of the day, I really do feel this is the best Batman movie ever made. And I see tremendous potential for the future. It was weird. I was watching this, and as excited as I am for Michael Keaton to return, I was like, this is it. We're here. Let's just focus on this. And so, Warner Brothers' buckshot strategy, the positive is that it delivers gems like this, but the negative is that then we move on to something else. And it's like, why? This is so good. All right, so where I want to start are the best Batman moments. Robert Pattinson. I see photos of him on the red carpet, and it's still hard for me to believe that he's a good Batman. I don't have a problem with the skinny Batman, but whatever weight he was at for the role, he's lost it. Maybe most of it. I don't know. We saw some shots of him as Bruce, but he spends most of the movie as Batman, which makes total sense because, of course, that's the true Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is the mask. So I'm sure that in future, I saw some complaints that there weren't enough Bruce Wayne scenes, but I think in future films, we'll have that. We'll get more. I think Batman will understand the necessity of his Bruce Wayne persona. Right now he's depressed. He doesn't really want to leave his room except as Batman. The first thing I want to point out is the monologue. I thought that the narration, so it's not a monologue really, but the narration of the film from, Batman's perspective was really wonderful. I loved it. I saw some reviews pointing out that it was like Travis Bickle and other vigilante characters in cinema. And I'm like, that might be true, but what it's really like is Batman comics, where he often will narrate the situation, particularly Batman Year One. So I really loved that. I thought it was extremely comics accurate because, Batman's not very chatty. So the only really way you can get into his head is if you're in his head. So I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was a really strong choice. Then I loved the idea that he weaponized the shadows. Like, we all know that Batman embraces fear because criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. But it was a really great, I think, way to expand on that he weaponized shadows, that, you don't know if he's in that shadow or not. I love when that spray can rolled into the shadows and that guy and that criminal, really, now, I don't know, I guess Batman believes in the broken windows policy, right? Any kind of crime leads to greater crime, but I'm like, I don't really think you're worth Batman's time, don't worry about it. And I always think of that really funny SNL sketch where they're like, really, he's breaking people's jaws over, stealing cars? But anyway, that was very clever when that rolled in there and the guy was, I was like, just forget it, I'll get a new paint can. And I thought that was brilliant. Like, they just turn on the bat signal to freak everybody out. And I was like, yes. Don't just turn it on because you need him, although how would you get in touch with him if you need him? I guess they have to clarify that. But it was just great that any moment Batman could be in the shadows. And then, of course, on that subway station, those guys got the short straw because he happened to be in those shadows. He was in that shadow. And when he came out, I was so impressed. And I love the sound. I think sound is so well used here, including the weight of the batsuit. He walks very slowly. I saw someone a reviewer describe it as like a pallbearer, but I didn't get that at all. It's funny, I saw also another review, I think it was the Hollywood Reporter, where the person loved the Adam West show and was like, why did Batman become so serious? And I'm like, you're holding on to a Batman from the 60s that's never been like that since? That's crazy, man. But anyway, I think for the most part, we're all on the same page in the kind of Batman that we want. But I loved that he moved slowly because it created, I think, a sense of Batman was not worried you were going to get away. He was like, you can do whatever you want. I've seen you. You're on my shit list. I'm coming. And I'm going to get you. I just thought that was fantastic. And the way that you heard his footsteps in the dark and you're like, am I hearing things? Is it actually Batman? And it was. It was just great. I just absolutely adored it. And I loved every single way that Robert Pattinson moved as Batman. He, as I said in my non-spoiler review, his movements are deliberate. You know, like he knows exactly, he doesn't, you know, everything is extremely well planned out. And that makes it even scarier because you're like, this guy's really on top of things. I particularly like the way his eyes moved. I thought that was just absolutely incredible. And I've seen other actors have blacked out their eyes around, you know, so that even though they have the eye holes to really create that sense. But I've never seen it as effective as it's done here. I really do wonder what the difference is. Are Robert Pattinson's eyes bigger, or maybe, you know? But it's from the the Earth 1 comic that Jeff Johns did. Very expressive eyes. And I think that, you know, eyes are the window to the soul. And in the past, you know, Batman's eyes have been whited out with lenses. And I've always liked that. But I really liked seeing his eyes here because it was one of our best ways to tell what he was thinking. And again, it's like once he saw you, it was over. And so that, again, the eyes are very well used there. You're like, oh no, he's looking over here. This is real bad. I loved it. Loved it. Then, you know, they leaned a little heavily on, you know, the orphan boy. You know, when the mayor's killed and his son is there, I was like, oh yes, of course, because you know, they didn't do an origin story. They jumped right into year 2, and I appreciated that. Because like Spider-Man, we've seen Batman's origin done to death at this point. It's like a Christmas Carol. Everyone knows the story. So I thought it was funny though when he saw that little boy, and I was like, whoa, hand him a Robin application, Batman. He's like, you were one step ahead of me, Grace. That's year 3. But I also, by the way, I think Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson are crazy enough to do Child Robin. You know, before Hollywood's been too scared, they're like, what if little children want to imitate this movie? And you're like, I don't know what to tell you. It's a child. That's the way it's done. Maybe not that young, but I was like, because I really want to see Robin done correctly. And I'm like, I think Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson are the two to do it. But yeah, I was like, give that little child a Robin application. So that was nice. But then so here are 2 of my favorite moments from the script that I thought were just really not only very well done, but caught me by surprise as it was, I saw also some reviews say that we've seen so many Batman movies at this point, we can't be surprised. And I'm like, well, I was surprised. And I've not only seen a lot of Batman movies, but I've read a lot of Batman comics. So I loved the juxtaposition of each time he goes to Penguin's Club twice, and he says, do you know who I am? First as Batman, and then as Bruce Wayne. And he gets incredibly different reactions from those 2 twin henchmen. What are those, the Carver brothers, right? I thought that was hilarious. I loved that. And I loved that Bruce Wayne got a better reaction. Oh, we'll talk about the Penguin Club. I mean, the Batman going around a club with like really, I in my non-spoiler review, I said I did not care for the music of Kurt Cobain, which annoyed some of you. But boy, do I love club techno. I was like, this is fantastic. I was just like, I was on cloud 9. So, but that was fantastic. Just absolutely great to do that scene that way. And it was one of my favorite parts of the movie because it was so perfectly captured what Batman is. And, you know, the duality and that he wants to be Batman, but sometimes he gets a better reaction to Bruce Wayne. Now, I read an interview after seeing the movie where Matt Reeves described his Bruce Wayne as a rock star recluse instead of a playboy. And I was like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. I think they didn't do a good enough job establishing that interpretation of Bruce Wayne. I think they'll get there. For instance, when Bruce Wayne was, his apartment was bombed, we'll talk about that more when we get to Alfred, but when he was showing up and he had the black t-shirt on, he started to look like that. And so I was getting bits of that already, but I didn't zero in on what Matt Reeves was trying to accomplish. And so I think that's an interesting modern approach to what Bruce Wayne would be like today. You know, I think Bruce Wayne, the depiction of Batman and Bruce Wayne is sometimes stuck in the 40s and maybe even 80s a little bit as to what, you know, that Playboy thing. And I just like for a long time, his rogues gallery was stuck in the mobster motif, which is why I kind of liked David Ayer putting the gang spin on it, from gangsters to gangs. And now, you know, going more like the Manhunter route, Fincher is a huge influence on this film, I think is also, and you know, with the social media and that kind of a thing, the lone criminal, but yet part of a community through the internet, you know, wouldn't that be interesting? And that's how Batman's Rogues Gallery kind of worked. We'll talk, you know, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I like updating the Batman mythos overall to more in a way that works. And so I think that the Rockstar Recluse could work. We just have to get there. And then the other thing I liked was when he said he was vengeance, and then the henchmen, they asked the henchmen in the arena, "Who are you?" And he said, I don't know if I put it in my Nigma thing, but I loved when they arrested Nigma and he had 2 driver's licenses and they're like, "Which one are you?" And Riddler says, "You tell me." And I was like, God damn it, that's brilliant. I loved it so much. I loved it so much. It was subtle, but yet it just hit you like a ton of bricks. It was great. But the henchman said, "I am vengeance." And Batman was like, uh-oh. I might have been a bad influence on some people. I thought that was, and you could even see that a little bit in Robert Pattinson's performance. He was like, that was also unexpected to Batman. And I thought that was great. And that's why Batman was like, maybe I have to change my branding a little bit because I seem to have created some problems for Gotham. But, it's just, again, 2 different ways you can take something, the vengeance idea. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. All right, next let's talk about as you can see, I love this movie. I have a lot of thoughts about it, so you can jump to different parts, but let's just settle in for a conversation. I love it, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts down below. I know some of you aren't going to like this movie. I knew the Rotten Tomatoes score would slip a little bit. Damn it. But, I think some of you are going to like it as much as me, and then we can geek out about it. All right, next, the Bat Tech. Like the animated series. It was current, but yet it had a real 1940s, almost 1940s sci-fi noir feel to it. I was like, that's ridiculous, but I love it. And it clearly works. I believed it worked, but it was just so artistic. It was almost a little bit like, Metropolis too, Fritz Lang's Metropolis. I thought it was a great choice. And the production design team deserves kudos because it's not only hard to design a world, but to design the tech of that world and yet still have it be believable as cutting edge. That's impressive. It's very, very impressive. Then, speaking of his wonderful toys, the Batmobile. Now, the Tumbler has in the past been my favorite Batmobile, and I still feel the Tumbler deserves his own special place in Bat history. But the fact that this tiny little muscle car, could be as cool as the Tumbler is a real, something that Matt Reeves and his team should be proud of. Now, the way it was introduced, Ursula in the Shadows, totally caught me off guard, and I thought it was brilliant. I didn't even know the car was there, and that's the point. You didn't even know the Batmobile was there, and then you hear it, and then so again, just like Batman, first you hear it, and you're like, oh crap, what's this? And then you see the fireball, for it to rev up its engines, and everyone runs to their car. And you would think, well, Batman's obviously going to catch them immediately, but then that's the brilliance of the movie, that the thing stalled. I loved that the Batmobile stalled, and it gave them a little bit of a head start on Batman. Of course, he made up the distance, because, he saw you. You were on his shit list. He's coming for you. But I just loved that. It made Batman, I think, more realistic, because, shit happens to Batman, too. He's like, darn it, Alfred. But I just thought that was just phenomenal. It just made me so happy. I laughed out loud when it stalled. And it was clever, again, from a writing perspective, because it made there be a car chase instead of it being over before it even started. So that was great. And then as everyone was running off, I loved that Catwoman took the money. She looked so cool on her motorcycle and the way she was driving and the way she picked up the money in the duffel bag, and she could only get one bag, but she was like, screw it, I'm getting something. It was just so Catwoman, and she looked just so perfect. It was one of my favorite moments of the car chase, just because it was so great. And then the car chase itself, the way this was filmed, from the use of Michael Giacomo's score, that was incredible, to the camera mounts on the respective vehicles. That just was visceral. I loved this sequence. And also the fear, again, using Batman's eyes, he was like, this, I hope I can make it. And he just, again, it wasn't so, I think Batman will eventually this is only his second year, he'll eventually get to a point where he's more skilled, but right now, the reason Batman is so successful is that he just wants it more than you. And I thought that really worked very, I think that's very relatable, and I think that worked very well. And he's also a very lucky guy. Worked very well in this car chase, where he was like, I'm just not giving up. And it was such a realistic car chase, and it was incredible. It was just one of the best sequences in the movie. Then let's talk now about Batman's mistake, which I didn't even see until Batman saw that he'd made a mistake. And again, brilliant writing. And I loved seeing Batman, by the way, examine crime scenes. And I love that there was a bat in the cage. They're like, well, I don't think that rat likes you. And Batman says it's not a rat. And you see it's a bat. And clearly Batman knows that's for him. I was like, this stuff's just brilliant. And so he takes out the envelope, and as they're exploring that crime scene and everything, he starts to get the feeling that Riddler knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And then he intentionally pulls back on trying to find out what the clues are because he doesn't want to expose his own identity. I was right there with Robert Pattinson's Batman, and I loved the fear in Robert Pattinson's Batman as well, where he was like, is this it? Is this the end of Rico? Is this the end of Batman? I was like, oh, this is incredible. And that's why he didn't know that Riddler was going to blow the seawall. It's not that he wasn't as smart as Riddler had hoped. It's that Riddler didn't realize that he had stumbled upon Batman's secret identity, and that's why Batman pulled back from doing the investigation. It was incredible. It was to me a better twist than any of the other bigger twists that they had lined up. It was incredible. All right, let's talk about Riddler. When he was saying Bruce Wayne in the interrogation room, and Batman's like, shut the hell up, man. I love that. But he wasn't. He just had a bone to pick with Bruce Wayne. Again, it was just a horrible coincidence. It's like, hey, when your alter ego is really famous, he comes up. He comes up in conversation. That was just great. And I thought I really related to what Riddler was saying everyone says they feel so bad for Bruce Wayne because he's an orphan, but he's a rich orphan in his little, hideaway in the clouds. What's his problem? And, nobody cares about us actual orphans. And when he said a baby died every winter, I was like, that's real bad. This is very bad. And I think also Bruce Wayne was kind of like, maybe I should, I was a child, but what the hell, Alfred? Isn't our name on that orphanage? I can't believe it, nobody paid more attention to that. That was allowed to happen. But, again, thank goodness there's no baby Batman. I appreciate that. So I loved that. I thought that whole speech was really strong. And I also liked the online community. It was small. My audience laughed when they were like, you had about 500 followers. But 500 people is an army. You can do a lot of damage with even just a couple of people, as we saw in the arena. We'll talk about the arena. I did not like that sequence too much. But anyway, I did think it was scary, and this was a twist I had not known about. I loved the idea that he was able to, not just like Batman weaponized the shadows, Riddler in a way had weaponized these people who were living in the shadows that nobody even knew about. And you're like, holy crap. I thought that was not only very smart, but very scary when we see what happens with Facebook and QAnon and things like that today, and the way people are weaponized through cults. And Riddler had kind of created a cult. And that was like very scary when you think about what happened with January 6th. You're like, was January 6th actually kind of like a Batman event? That's really freaky and weird. So I thought that was incredible. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Then the Arkham interrogation. Not only what Paul Dano was saying was brilliant, but how he looked. I love that he had soft, clean hair. Like there was this innocence to him, right? I thought that was such a great choice. Often when they depict criminals, they're at the end of their rope, they're a mess, but you could feel he could reach out and touch his hair. I just thought that was it humanized him. I just loved it. And I loved his relationship with Batman, that, he didn't know who Batman was. He wanted to be Batman's friend. We'll talk about Joker in a moment. With that riddle, what's the less you have, what makes them more valuable? A friend. I was like, I'll put that on a card. I was wondering, where did Riddler get those cards? Because they didn't seem like anyone would sell. I was like, are you making these somewhere? They're very impressive. I think that Warner Brothers could do a line of greeting cards, although maybe I don't want those to exist in the real world because people might use them for evil. But anyway, he just wanted to be friends with Batman. He felt a kinship with him. He felt Batman would get him, which is why it was so funny when he was like, this conversation's not going the way I thought it would, the way I dreamed it would, and he started to really lose it. I was like, this is phenomenal. Paul Dano, you could hardly tell it was him for most of the movie with the voice changer and everything, but he blew me away with just that one scene. He was incredible. I loved it. And I think, again, it points out, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's almost impossible to tell with Batman and his villains. And I guess here they are saying Batman came first to scare regular criminals, but then he inspired some people to level up their criminal game to be on, how Batman tried to level up, the police. And that's really fascinating, that's why these people, people are drawn to Gotham because it's the Super Bowl of criminality. You get to interact and go up against Batman. Loved it. And Batman, is a little nuts. We'll talk about Martha Arkham when we get to that. I don't think they handled that well at all. All right, so anyway, my next thing I want to talk about is Gotham City. Loved this Gotham City. It was incredible. I loved it so much. This was the kind of attention to detail you usually only see in video games. The Times Square sequences, the small little corners that they would run into, like coffee shops and bodegas, the constant rain. I loved it. Like the city could just never get clean. Like I just thought of that now, but it just, you could feel that when you were watching it. I just put my finger on what exactly it was now. I loved it. I loved the elevated train and always like that you could never see the sky almost. It was although you could see the bat signal, so you could see it sometimes. But I thought that was just really excellent. Gotham was just so perfectly realized. Down to Selina's apartment, which looked like it was right out of the comics. I just thought that was so great. And even the way, just where she lived and how she crawled out of the fire escape. I mean, I really felt like we'd actually gone into the comics. It was really weird. I was like, wow, you actually made that real. The Penguin Club, as I said, loved the Penguin Club. The music was a big part of that. The oomps, 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 oomps. I just loved it. And I loved that the name of the super VIP club was 44 Below. I was like, that's a great name for a club. And then we'll talk more about the scenes in these. I'm just talking about Gotham as a setting right now. And then the Wayne apartment, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, who designed this? No wonder you guys are all a little weird. I thought the Waynes were very miscast, by the way. I bought immediately that Bruce lived there, but his parents, when we saw that footage of them campaigning, and we really only saw his father, maybe Martha decorated it. They should have said that and be like, well, that explains a lot. But Thomas Wayne didn't look like he would live there at all. I mean, Thomas Wayne didn't even look like a particularly wealthy individual to me. He was very miscast. But yeah, I was like, this wee house is really weird. No wonder, Alfred, the first thing Alfred should have done is let's move somewhere else. So that was cool. But I do feel, even if they change Bruce Wayne to be this reclusive rock star, which again, I think could work, they need more of him to show the positive side of Gotham. Because a lot of times during this movie, I was like, why does anyone live here? That's often a question people ask about Gotham. And I think that it's important to answer that, to show, Bruce Wayne, I love saying that. He's supposed to show the Gotham that's pretty good, or at least, habitable, even though it's corrupt. So I would have liked to have, seen more of, the good side of Gotham, I guess. And then also, Arkham wasn't well enough realized, especially since Bruce Wayne clearly has ties to that because his mother comes from that family. We'll talk about that more when we get to the Martha Arkham reveal. But I thought that Arkham should have been much better. I mean, maybe they ran out of time, maybe they ran out of budget, I don't know. But Bruce Wayne should have had more of a relationship with Arkham Asylum. It just doesn't make any sense considering that reveal. But the bit we did see of Arkham I thought was cool. All right, then the flood. The flood happened. I knew about the flood going in. I knew about that very early, as I'd hinted. It was something that's done during Scott Snyder's comic book run that brought about 0 Year. Riddler flooded Gotham. I don't like the flood. I mean, I just got to this Gotham and you stuck it underwater. I want to explore it more. I mean, that was really disappointing to me. I guess it goes with the clean metaphor and all the rain. They're like, let's just dunk it in the bath. And I'm like, I mean, maybe you're baptizing it, but it's not going to turn out better. So I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. And I've never enjoyed Gotham flood storylines. I didn't like 0 Year. I didn't like No Man's Land. I thought the Gotham television show, when they did No Man's Land, that really took me out of it. And that's a personal choice. Some of you might love that storyline. But I think, when we're starting this new world with Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves as Batman, I think it's way too early to take Gotham off the board and to plunge them into No Man's Land. I mean, the whole point is territorial. How are our favorite villains, a rogues gallery, going to come out of this plot point? It just doesn't. I mean, I guess Penguin can consolidate his power. Maybe this will all be taken care of in the TV show that they're going to do on HBO Max, but I don't like it. I don't think Batman fits with an apocalyptic setting. Batman is an urban character, in my opinion, so I just have major problems with it. So I was like, I'm annoyed. One scene I did like, though, was when Catwoman was on her bike, and she's like, I'm trying to get out of the city, and they're like, it's flooding, get into the arena. I was like, I don't know why they thought the arena would save anybody, because it didn't seem to be particularly high up. It certainly wasn't above water level. But when she looked down and her very cool boot was being surrounded by water all of a sudden, I was like, that was a cool shot. All right, then for the arena sequence. I did think during the sequence that was where I was like, man, we need a real Batman, because who's going to, you got to do some crazy stuff to take on these henchmen. So that was crazy. That was weird. But then also there was some good fight, a couple of good fight sequences with the henchmen. I thought that was good. And when Catwoman was in danger, Batman used the adrenaline to go berserker so that he could save her. That was fine. I mean, I liked those moments. I mean, I thought they were cool. I mean, I guess they obviously did it to have this big third act finale with some more action and some bigger set pieces. But to me, the brilliance, I guess you can see from my spoiler review here, the brilliance of this Batman movie was its subtle moments, right? To me, an eye movement, just moving an eye said more to me sometimes than an actual punch. Hearing someone come out of the shadows was even more effective. So I don't know if it necessarily, to me, I would have rather dumped the arena sequence and dived more into the reveals and seen them instead of just having us be told about them. I guess that's what I would have done. I would have swapped that out. That would have been so much more interesting to me. So let's talk about all these reveals. So there's a Joker reveal. Yep, he's there, Barry Keoghan. I don't know what they did to him. He looked really weird and not like Joker in my opinion. The more I thought, at first I was just like, don't like that. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I guess this is the realism of someone who is dumped into a vat of chemicals and their face misshapen into a smile, right? I guess that is what he would look like. But he didn't seem to have white skin. He didn't seem to have green hair. His voice didn't seem particularly Joker-like to me. I mean, they both were laughing, so I was like, Joker told a riddle. Riddler laughed along with him. I was like, we need clear lines here between our villains. This is how Batman works, no stealing each other's routines, thank you very much. So again, I have a lot of faith in Matt Reeves at this point, so I'm not ready to dismiss this Joker, but I do think that his reveal was significantly lessened by the fact that I didn't feel it was Joker. But I eventually came to feel that Paul Dano was Riddler, so let's just see what happens. But it wasn't a great, except for him giving that riddle about what's more valuable the less you have and it being friends, overall, I was like, meh. All right. Other third act reveals that Martha is in Arkham and that her mother killed her father and then killed herself and that Martha herself had been in insane asylums. I'd be interested to know how Thomas Wayne met her and decided that marrying her was a good idea. I was like, I really need to know a little bit more about their relationship, right? It's like, I can see why his parents might be like, I love you, son, but really? That seems like a lot to chew. And the fact that no one knew about it, no one has known until this reporter came along. I'd be like, I would think that the Arkhams having one kill the other and that there's a whole insane asylum in the city named after them. I would think everybody would know about this. And this comes from the Batman Earth 1 comic where it was not a secret that Martha was an Arkham, she was from the Arkham family. In fact, she at one point takes Bruce as a child to go see her childhood home, which is locked up, and, says some weird stuff about it. And you're like, yeah, that's weird. But I would have preferred that. I would have liked to have a lot of flashbacks to explain these things and show them unfold instead of just being told about them. For instance, what about the rest of her family? The Arkhams who's running Arkham Asylum now? It's always, Jeremiah Arkham is, it's supposed to be the guy who runs it. Is that a relative of Martha? How does she know him? What about all that? And if she had a mental illness and had been in mental institutions, doesn't she still have to see a psychiatrist? Would it be maybe Hugo Strange? Doesn't she have to keep checking in? Nobody just gets immediately better. That seems to me like a lifelong situation of care and keeping an eye out for it. And also Bruce would, I think, have some memory of his mother being a little off. And on that note, why would they not talk about the brilliant thing that they did in Batman Earth 1? That kind of explains why Bruce has made the choices that he has, because he's a little off. And, that would explain why someone would decide, instead of to become an FBI agent or to run for mayor himself, he's going to dress as a giant bat and use his money to fight people, in the city. I think, that should be explored. It's there. Why not use it? That's very frustrating to me. And as many of you pointed out, the Wayne cufflinks are not only Wayne, but if you turn them over, they spell AA for Arkham Asylum. Why wasn't that made more clear? The brief little clip reel that had been put together by Riddler or the News, or a combination of the two of them, I don't remember now. I just thought that didn't do it. I thought that we could have gotten a lot more out of that, and they lost a lot of great opportunities to explore that. Again, I would have much preferred that than to the sports arena. Batman and crazy, creepy stuff happening in the dark, like that. I want the stuff that's going to haunt me and stick with me. Although some moments in the arena did. Then Carmine Falcone. Good on Jeffrey Wright's Gordon for releasing that audio to the news so that he couldn't get away with it. That was pretty good. The new, that was New York 1, substituting for Gotham 1, right, with the same anchor. So I thought that was very funny. That must have been fun for them to film that. But I liked that. I liked, it made, Gotham seem very modern. I thought that was great. But then, of course, the big reveal of the movie is that Carmine Falcone, it's a famous character, Maroni. So they actually had not taken down Maroni's drops. They had created their own drug. They're like, ooh, he's a drop head. And I'm like, hilarious. So like instead of taking down Maroni's drug operation, in fact, Falcone had just, ratted him out. He was the rat. Ratted out Maroni, and then secretly taken over his empire for himself, and now controlled the police and the DA and the mayor. I mean, today with all that we're seeing, we almost had a coup in this country. I'm not that surprised. I mean, they thought they kept saying this is going to rock Gotham to the core. No one will ever be the same. And I mean, honestly, I guess that just speaks to how jaded we are today. And also we have social media. So, that's the thing. Gordon didn't put it on Twitter, right? He's lucky the news agreed to run it. Who says Carmine Falcone isn't running the news? But I just thought it was no big deal whatsoever. I was like, well, whatever, I guess it was interesting that he said, bring him into the light so I can shoot him. That was kind of a cool twist. I like that. I thought that was pretty good. And I just didn't believe, by the way, that John Turturro would do any of this. He just didn't seem like that dark to me, I just didn't buy it. I thought he was poorly cast. Then, the whole thing with him being Selina's father, which I guess was supposed to be a big surprise. But if you know the comics, you're like, yeah, she was like, he's my father. And I think probably 80% of the people in the audience, maybe not that many people know Batman comics, but I would bet you at least 50% are like, yeah, we know. It's like Batman being like, my parents were killed. And we're like, okay, yeah, we know that. So I didn't think that, when writing the movie, they should have realized that would not be a big moment. It also made it creepy that he was hitting on her. I was like, I'm super creeped out by that, Although it was cool when she was like, hey, Dad, I was like, oh, she got him there. That was cool. And I wish they'd had 2 flashbacks at the beginning of the movie with Carmine Falcone, him talking to Selina's mother at the club. Why do I have to only hear? I would have liked to have seen Selina's mother. So that was ridiculous. And I also would have liked to have seen the situation where he was saved by Bruce's father in the middle of the night. I thought that would have been great. Why do I have to just hear about it on the steps of the funeral? By the way, they faked us out shooting. Maybe they were going to show her at one point, but when Falcone's lady friend turned around, it wasn't Zoe Kravitz, and I was just as surprised as Bruce because we'd seen them filming the scene. And Zoe Kravitz had been on set in that costume. Then the reveal that Thomas Wayne had not wanted the information about his wife to get out, so he could not buy the journalist off. So he decided, I'm like, how is this a secret? But anyway, he was like, I'm going to go to Carmine Falcone and see if he can help me out. Oh, I didn't know he'd kill the journalist. Come on, Thomas Wayne, how dumb are you? That to me was ridiculous. Alfred's like, he had no idea that he would kill him. And I'm like, why didn't you tell him? Because you're supposed to be someone who has a rough past and has been in the military. Why don't you, if you tell someone to shut someone down and quiet them, the end game is to kill them. That's obviously what's going to be done. So that to me held no water to me as to Thomas Wayne's innocence. I was like, maybe that's what he told everyone. But and Thomas Wayne was like, that was also ridiculous. Thomas Wayne's like, I'm going to go tell on you, Carmine Falcone. I'm like, first of all, who tells someone they're going to go tell on someone, right? That's just so dumb to me. He was, if you're going to tell on Carmine Falcone, good luck hoping that the police and the DA aren't already in his pocket. But why would you drive there immediately? Be like, I'm going to tell on you tomorrow. That gives you about 24 hours to take care of me before I tell anyone. Don't worry, I haven't told anyone yet. Who telegraphs like that? It was very stupid. Then I had a big problem with this change to the Batman mythology where you kind of know who the killers are, who killed the Waynes. The whole point is that you're not supposed to know because it was just crime. That's why Batman's vengeance can never be realized, because he'll never actually avenge his parents. So he's just trying to, just fight crime in general, because that's who he blames for his parents' murder. I'm like, you're just turning him into Huntress, where he wants to take care of the mob, because we've basically narrowed it down to Falcone or Maroni. That, Alfred's like, if only we knew for sure. I don't know why Batman wasn't like, who do I have to, I'm gonna just go beat the shit out of somebody and find out. I mean, Batman's also a criminal. I would think they would have some way to find out. I mean, and also, since I don't think Maroni or Falcone pulled the trigger themselves, there's always a trail. That's the whole point. If it's just a mugging gone wrong, there isn't. It ends there. That guy disappears into Joe Chill. I never liked it when they named it Joe Chill, and they tried to do this in the first Batman movie, saying that it was Joker, and I thought that was horrible. It's a faceless guy who runs into the night, and you just never. You never see him again, and you never. The point isn't who was it, but the system that allowed it to happen. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that change at all. I was like, don't like this. All right, then Peter Sarsgaard. Oh, he was so great. We knew he was in this movie, and it's funny that we'd seen the funeral clip, but I didn't make the connection that was him underneath all that duct tape. But he was very good in the club. I thought he did a great job there. But I said he had one great line. So when he was being interrogated, he had to answer the Riddler. I love that he had to wait for Batman to show up. That whole thing was done so well and very realistic to how it would actually go down with the police having to work with Batman. And because the Riddler asked for Batman specifically. So I love that Batman finally shows up and Sarsgaard's like, oh man, I'm really tired of this boy. This is not going well. I liked when the little police bot drove up to him and was like, hello. And he was like, are you kidding me? That was great. But then he had to answer the Riddler's questions. And Batman apparently was allowed to, help a friend. So that was great. But then on the second one, there was just a general thing that Riddler alluded to that Sarsgaard had done as the DA. And Batman's like, who did you help specifically? And I love that Peter Sarsgaard, even in the heat of the moment, was like, he didn't ask me who I helped specifically. I'm paraphrasing, but my whole theater laughed because it was incredible that Peter Sarsgaard's character at that moment still had the sense of mind not to incriminate himself and to give things away because he was worried about what happened. I think not only to him, to his family maybe, but I think largely to himself. That was, because, he might make it out of that alive. You don't know. You never know till it's over. But that was just really funny. And I think was Gotham in a nutshell. That Gotham was so corrupt that even when someone's pleading for their life, they're like, you're not going to get me. Nice try. You're not going to trip me up there. That was just incredible. Really well written, extremely well acted. All right, then Alfred. This Alfred's exactly out of Batman Earth 1. Exactly. Jeff Johns' fingerprints are all over this. And in some ways, it's very, very well. But, I don't think they did enough. I think they didn't do enough to establish why they did a change to Alfred. And if he had a background in military stuff, as they clearly made, as they said, why did he open up that envelope to Bruce Wayne? I mean, he's seen the writing from that Bruce has brought home so far. He knows that Bruce is, as after this Riddler character, and the Riddler character is going after high-profile targets in the city. I was like, he's not going to open that, but he did. It was like absolutely ridiculous. I was like, you don't have like a controlled thing down there in the Batcave to open this, or wait till Bruce gets home? It made absolutely no sense. Although I did like the addition of that secretary and that she picked up. That was a good twist. When Bruce was calling to get Alfred and she said, "Oh, I was trying to reach you. It's, something bad has happened." And they pulled back from the phone and you had the smoldering apartment. And I was like, that's awesome. That was great. I was like, oh, that poor apartment. It's like a historic thing at this point with all the detail work and the molding and everything. But I liked that character. And I did think the hospital scene with Bruce was very touching when Bruce said, I just can't go through that again of losing someone close. I loved it. They might be bringing back Alfred in the comics, by the way. Damian might be doing it. Damian. He's so great. He loves his Pennyworth. I love that. I think that's great. I miss Alfred in the comics. I think killing him was quite stupid. All right, so anyway, next, Catwoman. As I said in my non-spoiler review, I felt that Zoe Kravitz walked right off the comic book page, particularly Batman Year One. She not only looks like Catwoman, but moves like Catwoman. She had the right outfits. I loved her pixie cut. I loved the nails that were her idea. She's just incredible. Here I want to point out in the spoiler review, I love that the mayor's mistress was her roommate, Anika, and that reminded me a lot of Holly. I thought that was really, really interesting. Zoe Kravitz has recently said in some interviews that she viewed her Catwoman as bisexual and that she was attracted to Anika as well. And I kind of saw that. I saw that there, especially when Zoe Kravitz speaks on it. I'm like, oh yeah, I saw notes of that. Matt Reeves has said that that wasn't his interpretation, but that, he left it vague and that could certainly be seen there. I really didn't feel, though, that Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman had chemistry with anybody. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But I did like the Anika stuff because it reminded me very much of Catwoman's relationship with Holly in the comics. So I liked that a lot. I thought that was a great thing to add to her character here. I loved that she was a thief. When Batman's like, this has just all been about getting money, and she's like, Falcone owes me. I thought that was fantastic. I thought that it was great. I loved when she was cracking the safe. I think she did a fantastic. Even when she was walking around her apartment in her underwear, right out of the comic. And they didn't sexualize it, which I appreciate. But also, I think that one of the things that makes this movie PG-13 is that they intentionally, I think, took a lot of the sexuality out of the movie, which, had an effect on the Batman-Catwoman romantic relationship. But that was a choice that they just made. I think that even though they had the mayor having a mistress, it wasn't, the focus was more on her life in danger and that she'd been abused. It was not a particularly sexy film. And maybe because, that's not where Batman's head is at right now. He's not noticing it, so we're not noticing it. So I thought but it worked. Catwoman just did a fantastic. Zoe Kravitz did a wonderful job. As for the Bat-Cat relationship, up until the end, when they started to focus more on the romance, loved it so much. I thought their meet in the club, I had not seen that clip that had been released. I don't know why they released it. I thought it was brilliant that she came in there to serve drinks and to give some drugs to Penguin. I thought that was a great way for them to first meet. And then he noticed the boots in the photograph, and then he had just, because Batman notices everything, because you can see his eyes taking it all in. Fantastic. Very, very clever. Although I'd be like, Selina, maybe you want to rethink those boots because they're really giving you away. I loved the sequence where he has her go undercover in 44 Below with the eye camera and talking to her and how she uses that. And she seems like she's talking to the people in the club, but she's talking to him and his commentary on it. That was, again, another one of my, and again, it's subtle. That to me blew the arena scene out of the water. And he was on such a much smaller scale, but it was Batman and Catwoman in a nutshell. And it had that great technology in it. I loved that sequence. And we were in the club, and I love the club. So that was fantastic. And then and then he's like, she's like, do you care what happens to me? And then she thinks he's looking in her eyes, but he's actually just checking the camera. Great stuff. Now, as for the romance, and I didn't even think that moment there was a romance there. I thought it was too cold the way he grabbed her chin. I think it's on both their faults. I don't think either one of them played romance. I don't think that Robert Pattinson did. I don't think that Zoe Kravitz did. I thought, as I said, a work or sibling relationship between the two of them, which was really well done, but I bought them more separate than I did buy them together. Jeffrey Wright. Loved Jeffrey Wright here. He is Gordon. He is just, again, right off the comic book page. So incredibly well cast. I loved him working with Batman. He's not quite commissioner yet. It's funny, whenever they have these stories and Gordon isn't commissioner yet and someone else walks in and they're like, hey, commish, I'm like, you're going to die. Because I know that Gordon's going to be commissioner eventually. So I'm like, not long for you, buddy. And again, they that commissioner with the rats and that device, I was like, thanks for not showing me. I'm in my imagination, just like Batman uses our criminal's imagination, Matt Reeves had us use our imagination. And I think it was very effective and broadens the audience for this movie. But I just loved Batman and Gordon's relationship. I think it said a lot when Gordon turned to him and said, you're the only one I trust. And you're like, really? That weird guy who's wearing a bat suit and fighting crime, you don't even know who he actually is? That says a lot about Gotham. Loved it. I mean, that's Gotham. I just absolutely, it's like so good. I know that Chinatown is an influence on this movie, and I guess, that's a famous line. That's Chinatown from that movie, and I guess, that's Gotham is like, I think very much that could be like a catchphrase for this movie. That's Gotham. So I loved it. I love the line where Gordon says, do you think that cop is moonlighting as a bouncer? And Batman says, I think that bouncer is moonlighting as a cop. I saw that was a clip that they released. Why would they release that clip? I had not seen it. I loved that moment in the movie. I thought that was a hilarious line. And just the banter was just great between the two of them. I loved it, including when Batman's like, no guns. And Gordon says, that's your thing, man. I loved that. I thought that was so great. Although I couldn't believe they turned their back on all those dropheads to explore the orphanage. They're like, oh, it's just some dropheads. Let's keep going. I'd be like, they might work for Riddler. Watch your six, man. So that was, but I thought that was great. I thought the GCPD sequences were wonderful. I loved that one, what was it, Martinez was really mean to Batman, but was very nice to Bruce Wayne. Oh, it was great stuff. I like the GCPD. I think the GCPD are really cool characters. And, Batman has a complicated relationship with them, as we all know. And I thought that was captured perfectly in this movie. Then Penguin. Wow, so funny. He was so funny. Oh, Colin Farrell. I still can't believe that's him under all that. He truly transformed and became a different character. Like with Jared Leto in House of Gucci, I can't believe how long. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a minute. 47 minutes. We're going a little longer, but what a spoiler review. I love this movie, as I told you. I just love it so much. But I always saw Jared Leto underneath all that latex. I was impressed, but I knew it was Jared Leto under there. With Colin Farrell here, it's just a totally different person, and it's an amazing performance. I thought at first I thought he didn't look very much like Penguin, but I kind of think that he does. As the movie went along, I was like, oh, that's like a very realistic take on Penguin. But I was not prepared for how funny he was. I laughed so hard when Batman said something when he was leaving with the photos, and he said something about the mayor, and Penguin looks at the pics and he's like, is that the mayor? Oh, it was great the way he did that. And he made Batman really lose his temper, but I laughed so hard. I thought that was great. I loved when he laughed at Gordon and Batman when they took him in after the car chase, and he was like, you guys think you're such great detectives, you're so stupid. Even I figured that out. It was just wonderful. He was a bigger than life character. He didn't have a flashy costume. He wasn't, Colin Farrell said he wanted to have a cigarette or a cigar and they wouldn't let him. But he was so bigger in life than life, he qualified as a Batman rogue. He was just great. And I can't wait to see that character evolve. But I thought he was just wonderful. So that's my spoiler review of the Batman. Some more coverage coming, but that's our spoiler discussion. We're having a great time with this movie. I hope it does well. I'm nervous. What were your favorite parts? I would love to hear your favorite parts. And where do you think it could have been a little bit better? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.